This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Is Oscar Piastri actually doing a better job at McLaren than Daniel Ricciardo was? Lando seems to think so, as he's been quoted saying that Oscar has probably been pushing me more in the last couple of years, but I wanted to find out, is that probably actually reality? We're 5 races into 2023, which gives us a good sample set of qualifying data to look at, the benchmark of course being Lando Norris, whose level at that team over the last couple of seasons has stayed pretty consistently impressive. Lando has been clear of both undoubtedly, but is Piastri closer to him than Daniel was? 5 races this year, first 5 races last year. Compared, the results might surprise you. Actually, get in the comments below, guess what the average gap was between Lando and Daniel 5 races into last year and what the average is now between Oscar and Lando. Let's see how close you get, because I wasn't. Let's talk about it. Yes, the caveat of course here is that this is Oscar Piastri's rookie season. It was Daniel's 12th season in Formula 1 last year. A veteran versus a junior, but for now I'm not interested in that context. I'm purely comparing driver A to driver B. Qualifying data will be analysed. For this I'm not going to look so much at race pace because there's a lot of nuance that goes into that. Qualifying is more of a reflection of actual pace and ultimate confidence in the car. I'm also not just looking at the quickest qualifying laps from each session, I'm looking at all of the qualifying laps, all of the push laps that both drivers compete in all sessions that they both reach. Big shout out to F1 Tempo as well, whose data sets really helped me in compiling and putting this all together, and also allowed me to use screenshots from their website in this video. Check them out, link below. Bahrain 2022. Now, Lando did progress beyond Q1, but Daniel got knocked out in Q1, so we're only comparing all of their push laps in Q1, of which both did 3. Lando's average from those 3 was a 132.904. Daniel's average was a 133.358, which means the gap is 0.454 advantage Lando. Do you get it? Do you see where I'm going with this? No big drama in this session. Lando was just straight up faster. Bahrain 2023, situation was quite similar. This year, actually, Lando progressed beyond Q1, but Oscar this time got knocked out in Q1. Although both only set 2 lap times, Lando's average a 132.104, Oscar's a 132.367. The average gap, 0.263 advantage Norris. This puts Oscar at about a 0.2 second lead over Daniel relative to Lando at the moment, but there's plenty more data to look at, so don't get ahead of yourself, Piastri fans. Because for sure, if we're going to compare their websites, Lando's great quality, look at the graphics and branding on here. Daniel's really nice as well, got his store, all his Enchante stuff. Oscar's is somewhat lacking. It could do an injection of creativity, and perhaps today's video sponsor Squarespace could help him out. With thousands of beautiful drag and drop templates, 24/7 customer support as well. It's honestly a breeze to create your own beautiful online home, just like Lando and Daniel have. Did they use Squarespace to make their websites? I have no idea, but there's no reason why you can't replicate these formats. Get something for yourself that looks every bit as good, whether it's a portfolio, blog, online store. Have a play around with Squarespace free of charge as well. It's only when you want to put your finished website live to the world you have to pay anything, and when that time inevitably comes around, head to squarespace.com/TommoF1 to get 10% off your first website or domain. Saudi 2022. Much more data to go on from Saudi Arabia as both drivers reached Q2. Now, Latifi did bin it in Q1, which didn't seem to affect either of the McLaren drivers, and in Q2 Mick Schumacher had that huge shunt and both McLaren drivers were on their outlaps at the time. However, we still managed 5 push laps from each. The gap advantaged Norris, not by too much though, 0.162 seconds to Lando. In all of those 5, Daniel never went quicker on the similarly timed lap. However, he was always very, very close. Saudi 2023. Now, this was a very out of character stinker from Lando. Binned it into the wall, clipped the inside in the final corner, damaged his steering, had only put 1 quick lap time on the board. Oscar, on the other hand, managed to get all the way to Q3. Now, for the interest of this video, I'm only going to look at Oscar's Q1 times, which he set 4 actually, compared to Lando's 1, a 130.447. Oscar's averaged out at 130.325, giving Oscar Piastri a 0.122 advantage relative to Lando. Have some of that, Norris. Australia 2022. Now, both McLarens reached Q3 in Australia. This was a very productive weekend for the Papayans. 7 push laps each to compare. Lots of data, lots of lap times. But who came out on top? Remember, this was the mad qualifying where Vettel couldn't make it out at the start. Then Stroll and Latifi had the most comedically bad accident blending into each other in Q1, that was actually probably more on Stroll in my opinion. But actually that red flag then allowed Aston Martin to fix Vettel's car, and then he did get to go out in the end. Crunching the numbers from all 7 laps for both Lando and Daniel, the advantage is for Lando, and it's quite big, 0.353 in the end. Australia 2023. Nowhere near as successful this year. Unfortunately, Piastri went out in Q1 by just shy of half a tenth in the end. Now remember, we had Checo going off in the gravel with his kind of throttle somewhat sticking through the corners, but we still did get 4 comparative lap times from both drivers. And they averaged pretty similar to actually Lando and Daniel's. It was 0.308 this time, still an advantage, Lando Norris. Imola 2022. Round 4 was an Imola sprint weekend last season. We still haven't had Imola yet this year. And on the Friday qualifying, we actually got both cars reaching Q3. However, because the heavens started opening late on in the sessions, I'm not going to be comparing their Q3 lap times. I think it's going to skew the statistics of this. There's still 4 lap times each to compare. That's enough. In fact, they might have got some more Q2 laps on the board, but Carlos Sainz binned it in Q2, maybe just as the rain started. He went off, spun into the gravel. Very Carlos Sainz behaviour from last year, I think. Of those 4 laps each, the gap between the two of them, Lando and Daniel, was actually even bigger than in Australia. 0.443 in the end, advantage Lando. Azerbaijan 2023. Round 4 this year was Baku, Azerbaijan, another sprint weekend, with both cars managing Q3. Great success, well done. Actually, Oscar set 2 more laps than Lando, overall 8 in total versus Norris's 6. Now this was an extra tough weekend for Oscar, given he was sick. He could only eat like 4 dry pieces of toast all weekend, which can't have helped his performances. But then I suppose Lando was ill a lot of last season seemingly, so it happens. Remember, De Vries binned it in Q1, as did Gasly as well, a car that Alpine had worked all night to fix. Well done, Pierre. But the Papayans kept it clean, and the average qualifying gap was actually the biggest we've seen so far in all of these that we've gone. It was averaging at 0.463 advantage Norris. Lando definitely had the measure over Oscar in Azerbaijan. Miami 2022. Round 5, Miami. I was there actually last year on the day for qualifying, and seeing the cars go full tilt through those S's where Charles Leclerc spun this weekend. Unreal, mate. Unreal. In Q1, Daniel actually had the measure of Lando. Their first 2 laps each, Daniel was quicker. However, Ricciardo couldn't make it out of Q2, whereas Lando got all the way to Q3. Of all the comparative runs, 4 for Daniel, 5 for Lando. The gap was advantage Norris once again, but only of 0.220, so not awful. Miami 2023. Finally, round 5 of this season, and McLaren were nowhere all weekend. An absolute stinker. Both out in Q1, not many laps to compare here, just 2 for Lando, 3 for Oscar. It's all about being out at the right time as this track was ramping up constantly. The gap in the end averaging almost identical, 0.035 advantage Lando. Very little in it this weekend. It was a good look for Oscar, even if it was a bad look for McLaren. So what is the overall gap? Lando to Daniel in 2022 first and foremost. 5 weekends, 24 laps in total for Lando, 23 laps for Daniel. The average gap, advantage Lando of course, 0.326 seconds. Anything over 2 tenths is worthy of note. However, is 0.326 a drubbing? I don't know. I feel like there's teammate pairings we see one do that to the other and the other one's not got their seat called into question constantly. It's not great, but it's not a complete annihilation. But the main point of this video is, how does that gap compare to Oscar's this year? So in 2023, there have been significantly less laps to take into account for Lando in particular, only 15 in total, whereas we've got 21 for Oscar. Now, a big part of that 6-lap gap is, of course, Saudi, where Lando shunted and Oscar got 4 laps on the ball, but I have to include that because you have to reflect that Lando made a mistake there. And of all the 10 sessions we've looked at in total, this was the only crash from any driver. So, naughty Lando, not good. The gap, of course, is still in Lando's favour, but is it 0.326? No, it's lower. It's 0.189. That's 58% of what Ricciardo's gap to Lando was. 58%, it's almost half. And even if we remove Saudi completely from Oscar's numbers and just compare 4 rounds, with Lando not making that mistake, the gap is still only 0.267, a good half a tenth lower than what it was between Daniel and Lando. So, has Oscar been significantly closer to Lando in 2023 than Daniel was to Lando in 2022? Yes, fact. But what do I think about this? Because look, obviously at the start of the video I was like, it's driver A, driver B. I'm not going to add any additional context to it, but now I'm going to reintroduce the context, just like that. A rookie has come into McLaren and almost half the qualifying gap to his teammate compared to a 12-year veteran with 8 race wins under his helmet. I love Daniel Ricciardo, but that is the fact of the matter. Oscar has shown he is more adept to this McLaren. Daniel said it last year, ignorance is bliss, and I think that's paying dividends now for Oscar. Look, McLaren have had a really tough start to this season in particular. I mean, it wasn't great last year. Bahrain was an absolute shocker last year, but it's not been good this year, even 5 rounds in. The most recent upgrades don't seem to have delivered what they were expecting. Oscar's been ill. Lando's been caught in loads of DRS trains. They've got super unlucky with damage. I mean, Saudi was a joke, and the car's not been very reliable. I mean, Oscar had problems last weekend. However, given his rookiness, I think Piastri has been a bright light in a sea of darkness for McLaren. Given how highly we rate Norris and how long he's been at that team, given Piastri's gap is within a couple of tenths after just 5 rounds, that gap's not insurmountable once Oscar gets more bedded, settled in that environment at McLaren. Does this vindicate McLaren's decision to pay off Daniel, 18 million they said it was in the end, and then swiping Piastri from Alpine? I would say it does. $18 million is still less than the difference between, in terms of prize money, it's about $12 million per position, right? So if McLaren gain 2 positions relative where they would have maybe been with Daniel, having Oscar in the seat instead, that's an extra 24 mil coming in. It's looking very, 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 very tight, tighter than it's been for maybe ever in that kind of midfield. It's not really midfield, is it? It's just, you know, Alpine down. But also they have got, I think, an Oscar Piastri, a worldy potential driver on their hands, and who knows what he could develop and turn into. Even if they can't keep him, you could say the same for Lando as well. You know, Lando's unarguably rumoured like 30 million a year right now. Even if they can't keep hold of him, if someone does want to take Lando Norris, whose contract ends at the end of 2025, then they're going to have to pay. I'm sure there's a significant buyout clause in his contract, and same could maybe be said for Piastri, even though he's not earning a massive wage. He's on sub, $1 million apparently. It's still not bad, but it's nowhere near what Lando's earning. I'm sure super agent Mark Webber will negotiate up that fee eventually. If it comes good for, Piastri at McLaren, then sweet. If he keeps doing bits and keeps closing that gap to Norris, then he will be considered just as highly. He's a bit younger than Lando as well, so who knows, maybe a big team, a Mercedes, Ferrari, whoever, swoop in and snap him off of McLaren's hands, and McLaren's get a good payout fee for that as well, potentially. Really, no one wins from the McLaren-Ricciardo situation. Okay, yes, Ricciardo got the big payoff, but he also lost his F1 seat, and the chances of him coming back are not looking great if he wants a competitive car. I'm surprised, A, that Oscar is as close as he is, and B, that Daniel wasn't close. I thought Daniel would have been definitely within a few tenths of Lando, if not closer to 2 tenths, and I didn't expect Oscar to be within 2 tenths. I thought, going into this video, they would be pretty much equal, Daniel and Oscar, but that's not the case. The numbers don't reflect that. But then again, I do think that over Daniel's tenure at McLaren, qualifying was the thing that bit him most. He would qualify, a few 4 tenths back from Lando, which would put him 5, 6, 7 places back from Lando. And then in the race, he didn't have the car and the confidence to make up all of those positions. The race pace, I don't think, was a massive issue. But again, I said this already, qualifying punishes you if you've not got ultimate confidence in the car, because that's the one time all weekend you are pushing 100%, unless you're obviously trying to reel someone in towards the end of the race, I suppose, or in the first couple of laps. But even then, first couple of laps, you're not going to be crazy pro risk, are you? But those are the numbers. How close was your guess? Maybe go down to your comment and edit and add any additional context. Are you surprised, or did you nail it? Were you spot on? I'm keen to hear what you think. I'll see you in the comments. Thank you again to Squarespace for sponsoring what I do. My name's Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.